I think people could benefit from just hearing a little bit about our beginning prayer journeys and our relationship, and then where we are today and why we feel led to even do this prayer challenge.
Like a storm with an anchor. And finding no good news
Yeah,
in
I think you're right, though. I think that it's something that prayer has to be intentional sometimes for us to do, because we're not always, maybe that's not our first go to, at least, sometimes it's not mine, right? And becoming a habit as well, that's where we go. That's, we bring it to God, or that it's not ours to keep, and that we take it to God, with our prayers, with what we need, with what, if we're intercessory, with what others need. I don't think it's just it just happens. Sometimes it does, but
Oh, I'm super guilty of that. I was actually just thinking about that yesterday. I ran a flash sale on my website and I didn't post it right and it didn't come out right. And I was thinking about it and I was thinking about it. And then I was like, I am such an impulsive decision maker, and I never pray when I think of something before I act on it. And it's always after the fact. And then I'm like, oh, well, if I would have just given God time to work this out in my heart and my mind, it probably would have been a lot smoother.
Mm.
I rely on God for all the big stuff. It's the little stuff that I struggle with. It's just
Yeah,
the
I think
intricacy.
most people are like that. And I think it's always about the next step of surrender. Like the more things that we surrender to him, the more reason we have to talk to him. Like if that makes sense. So the more things that we place in his hands where they belong, the more we are in like that constant communion with him and talking to him about all of those things. So it's like, well, what's the next step for this? What's the next step for this? What's the next step for this? How can I, I don't know, like release our worries and stuff, because we tend to take those things back out of his hands all the time, right? Like the things that we've already surrendered lots of times, like, like if you're worried about specific things, like you're worried about your husband, you're worried about your kids, you're worried about your job, you're worried about what's going on in the world, you're worried about your health, you're worried about whatever it is, or there's a specific situation with a person, or something at your home, or any of those kind of things, or something that's going on with your car even, or your pet or whatever. But all of those things, like if you hold on to that all the time and you're not surrendering that to him, then you don't really have a reason to talk to him about it. You know what I mean? So the more we give those things over to him, the more we can be like, okay, God, what is your plan for this? And then we get to unburden ourselves of all of that, because he wants to carry it anyways.
Yeah.
He made us weak in certain areas because he wants to be our strength, like we can't do all the things that he created us to do without him. So I think keeping that at the forefront of our minds is just so important. And then you are able to cultivate more of that relationship with his heart, because he's concerned about all of the small things, like every single piece of your life. And I don't know, we forget that sometimes. We're like, well, I just got this. But what if he wants to do it with you? Because it's all about the relationship for him. He wants to have a relationship with you and talk to you about everything that is on your heart. And he wants to talk to you about what's on his heart. So I don't know. It's just that's like friendship that we can really dive into and have that comfort and trust with him.
Yeah. It reminds me of something that it's a visual of that. If we are holding on to something, then how can we take hold of something else? So if we open our hands and we give it, then we can receive, right? And it's not just about receiving, but it's the next blessing that maybe God wants to give us. And it might be, while you were talking, it was like, oh, well, it's like, okay, thank you. Now that you've given that to me, I can give you this.
Yeah, and it's a daily thing, like because it's hard to always like have that on your mind of surrendering those things to him involving him in everything. We get so used to doing things on our own, you know?
I think it's the mind shift. And I think I'll tell you how I did it. And mine was I used to call my very best friend every day, 4 or 5 times. And I would tell her all my woes. I mean, I told her everything, you know? I mean, I'd pray, but I told her everything. And I would talk to myself a lot, you know, like just think, well, I wonder what I'm going to do today, or I wonder da-da-da, or da-da-da. And one day I went to pick up the phone to call her, and I had been praying, and it was like, I felt like God was saying, are you going to call her? Or are you going to trust me? Like, who are you giving your problems to? And I think we do that. And I think that we look to the world for a solution. I'm going to call Sherry because she's going to be able to tell me how to fix this. And then Sherry can't meet my expectations. And then now I'm mad at Sherry. And then Sherry doesn't know I'm angry with her, but she didn't meet my expectations. And now there's a barrier, you know, and I think that we do that with everything. And I think that kind of pushes our prayers a little to the side because, well, God, I prayed and you put Sherry in front of me and she failed me, you know, I mean, not literally like that, but I mean, I think that's how it works. So for me, it was, okay, God, well, you'll be my best friend. Like, and then I want you to be my inner voice. And so that was hard for me, but I believed it. Like, if you will show me, then people I always grew up, don't test God. Well, I did, you know, and I just think he's like my ultimate dad. And my dad would say, bring me everything. You know, my dad would say, I would have helped you if you would have just told me, you know, and so I think that's part of the free will. And so I did. I just said, okay, God, show me what to wear. Show me how to talk. Show me how to be. But I think it's just, you just have to treat him like he's your best friend. And sometimes we're scared to do that. But he already knows who we are. Like, he's laughing because we think we're hiding. We're not hiding. He sees us. He already knows who we are. And he loves us just like that. He loves me when I stole, when I lied, when I cheated, everything I've ever done. He don't care. He's still there. And then I think the more I talk to him, the more I feel bad for my sins. Like, I always wonder, like, well, what's repentance? You know, like, I forgive it. Forgive me for my sins. But I didn't understand it. But now that I talk to him every day and I have that relationship, when I do something, I'm like, oh, God, oh. You're like, I know I'm doing it and I'm so sorry. Like, I don't want to do it no more. So the next time I'm like, oh, I don't want to feel that way again. And so it just changes who I am and how I live my day. It doesn't mean that I don't mess up. It doesn't mean anything. It just means I do it differently and I carry him differently. And I can love myself and I feel loved differently. But I didn't feel that way when I didn't talk to him and give him everything. But it was really like having to say, okay, self, I'm not talking to you no more. I'm going to talk to God. And okay, my best friend, I'm not talking to you anymore. And unfortunately, we don't talk anymore. And it's really sad. But my whole life has been changed.
Mm-hmm.
And the prayers that I shared with God were not easy, but it was just show me, help me. Like, I didn't even know where to start. And so the smallest, simplest things got me the furthest. So don't complicate it.
It's almost like you have to hit a bottom, right? For depending on how you come into your relationship with God. I know for me, I'm doing 2 Bible studies right now, and one of them I'm doing a post-abortive Bible study. So it's literally like all the names of God and how God revealed himself in the Bible. And one of them is El Roi. So he's all seeing, right? He sees everything. And that is terrifying to someone who's an active walking in sin sinner. And so through this Bible study, I've learned already just in 3 weeks so much about myself and what my life was like before I came to the foot of the cross versus what it's like now, but I still see some of those patterns. So for me, I ran from God, right? I didn't want God to see me, even though he can I didn't want God to see me because I was behaving in a way that was ungodly. And so I always believed in God, but I didn't follow. So now that I follow, I think that I'm still trying to get to that point where I don't hide from God, even though I'm not living in a sinful life. I'm still trying to work to get to that point of that constant communication. Some days I do really well, but other days I'm so self-reliant that I forget that there's this huge, I love that you said the ultimate dad. There's this huge father that just wants me to surrender, not just the big things, but all the things, and let him lead me. And I take control of my life all the time because I did it for so long in my hiding from him. And it's been really interesting to unveil that part of who I have been for such a huge majority of my life, and come into more surrender and come into more faith around God's ability to literally control my life.
Yeah.
Tough one. I'm not going to lie. That's a real tough one. But
I think it takes years.
My heart wants it. Yeah. And I mean, I've only been a Christian, a walking with God Christian for the last, 5 years. So, but, and the learning process of all of that takes so much time. So, but I am just, my heart wants it. My heart craves it. I think about it all the time. But when it comes to making decisions around anything to do with my business, my life, my marriage is a different story. I pray about my marriage all the time, because that's where I want God to be most centered. Right. But my kid, my, just anything, I have to make that physical conscious decision that never comes to mind. Well, I shouldn't say never, but most of the time doesn't come to my mind first thing. Oh, wait, I need to pray about this. And like I said, even with that ad that I posted yesterday on social media for my business, I didn't pray about it before I did it. I prayed about it after I did it when I realized that I didn't do it right.
But I think he knows our heart in those times. And I think he hears our cry when we say, God, I didn't do it right that time, but I really wanted to. I think that shapes us so that in time we get to where we want to be. But again, I think it's like that, a dance routine, this elaborate dance routine, but at the end you're like, Shaw, And so like you practice and you get there and you get a little closer, then you get a little closer, and then you get a little closer, and then it. And it's like riding a bicycle, and it's like he becomes that part of the relationship. And I think that's growing the relationship with him so that you get to that point where you're like, Shaw.
Yeah, I think it partly too is recognizing those things about ourselves, right? And where the places where we need Jesus the most to come in and heal those sort of broken places and just the things that have separated us from him, So I think that's amazing. We all need more of his healing in our hearts so that we can be closer to him and have that be our first thought, but it's still a struggle, and God knows that we're not perfect.
Yeah.
And he makes allowances for that, like he's not expecting perfection from us. He's the only one who's perfect. So he's the one that we can rely on. So that's always so encouraging to me, is that he knows that we're not perfect and he's not expecting perfection from us. Because I think so much of we get kind of hung up on that. Like we have to somehow be perfect for him before he'll accept us and talk to us and love us and stuff like that. And it's different for everybody. Like we all deal with that in different ways, I think. But yeah, he just wants us to come to him as we are and work a miracle in each of our hearts.
Yeah. So unique.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. But I think where you guys are coming from is just like, that's exactly it. That's exactly the point of this challenge, is just to carve out some more space for him in our lives. I mean, that's the point of this prayer challenge, is to have a little more time with him and to have a little more of his presence in our lives, because that's what we need. That's what everybody needs. That's what the world needs. That's what we need. The more we're filled with him, and the more light we can bring to those around us. So, yeah.
I feel like I'm a slow start, and there might be other people out there that were a slow start, because I wasn't brought up in the church. I had an agnostic mother, and my dad was not really, promoting going to church, so I didn't grow up with it. And it wasn't until 1997, 98 that I was just sitting here trying to figure out how long ago is that, and that's 25 years ago or more. It's more probably. Anyway, that because my kids were very young and I was going through divorce, and that's when I met God. And I do remember distinctly waking up in the middle of the night and seeing that hand reached out to me, and it scared me, honestly, because I was like, whoa. And just like you see in the pictures, you just see it from about here down, right? That hand reaching out. And I think I've done too much of this, so it has been very slow in my progression. But I also see, like you were talking about, Julie, with leaning on that friend. And I leaned on people when I was going through divorce, because there was so much turmoil going on in that time. With basically a husband that was not infidelity, we'll just say that. And so I had a 3 and a 5-year-old, and just trying to get through that as not a Christian, basically, but becoming into it. And so I know that more recently, and I wish I had known you ladies back then, because my progress would have been probably a lot quicker. I wasn't around people that I would say were solid true Christians, at that time. I look back and I can see, it was a watered down church, that I was going to. Praise God, it led my mother to Jesus, and she died a believer. And that's probably why I was there, right? So it's just, everything happens for a reason, and I know that I've gotten better about letting go of some things and reaching out to God more. But it's definitely, for one who always can do it themselves, always, it is, it's not easy, to go through that, to make the changes and let go.
I think sometimes too, there's things that are in our way that we don't even see. And that could be anything from clutter in our home, a friend that we're trying to be friends with, or we think is our friend. And I think sometimes we run from that. Like, I know, Sherry, you mentioned divorce, and that's when really I started my relationship with Jesus. It was in 2009. My mom had breast cancer, and basically marriage was falling apart too. And I mean, I don't know. It was just a different time, and trying to figure it out was so much, But I think it's just I think our hearts will lead us where we need to go. And I think it's just important to follow that and just trust in yourself and know that when you ask him and you talk to him, he's there, and just go. You just trust what you feel. Sometimes it's very hard to feel that, and we just don't want to walk where we feel because we're so scared of what might happen. But I just want to encourage you to think, what if it is wonderful? Or what if he does reveal what will get you to what you've been praying for? Because I think I blocked my blessings. I think I would pray and God would give me the answers to my prayer, but I would be too scared to take the step to even reach what he has offered me. And maybe that's joining a group, whether it's, maybe you're lonely and you're like, I really would love a community of friends, and you love to sew. Well, maybe join a sewing group. That's, you're right people. And here's the thing, you can test it out, like you can test out churches. You can, you can sample, you can have little samples. So be open to just following your heart when you pray, and knowing that listening, because I would always be like, listening or relationships should be like now. It takes a long time. Just like we said, like developing a routine, it takes a while. But then also to listen, that's a whole nother ball game, I think. So just really look to yourself and not to the world. Just hone in and follow our prayer challenge, because we'll talk about and give some prompts too. So we'll share more on this.
Oh yeah. There's going to be tons of information in the membership on this. I also think it's really important to point out, because one of the things that was so intimidating to me was the idea of having to be on my knees to pray. Getting on your knees to pray is a really, I mean, it's definitely a humbling thing. It's a good thing to be on your knees to pray, but God, you can't have a relationship on your knees 24 hours a day. The idea of prayer is not about you sitting by your bedside on your knees all day long talking to God. It's about, it's about having that conversation. Every time you stop in a thought and talk to God, you're in prayer. But I think Julie hit something really important too, is we have to stop and listen too. If all we're doing is yammering about what's going on in our mind and heart, but we don't give God the opportunity to respond, then we're missing a huge part of what prayer looks like. So taking that time to be quiet is as important as talking to God, because a relationship is two ways, right? So, and that's another weakness for me.
Same here.
Too busy.
But that could also be do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So do you want somebody to listen to you? I do, so yeah, that's a reminder to me.
He wants to hear everything. Believe me, he does.
Yeah.
But we
I just don't want to hear everything he has to say.
Yeah, but we also have to allow him to speak into what's going on to our lives so that we can receive what he's offering. So,
and sometimes it may not be what we want, because I assure you, I did not pray for all of these things to happen, what I'm dealing with the retreats and these moms. It was not my plan. My intentional plan was to do kidney disease coaching.
Yes.
Not here. And so he has reshaped my path, and it's better, but it's beyond my imagination. And so I think sometimes we have to put aside our prayers or what we think, and we just have to open it up and say, God, show me.
Mm-hmm.
God, guide me, and let me just do the best I can today. But there's so much more to come on that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So join our prayer challenge. Starts today and it goes for the next 40 days. And we're going to sprinkle in so much in there about how we pray, prayer topics, prompts, and maybe even a little fasting and praying advice from Ms. Bree. So we will look forward to seeing you in there. Links for everything will be in the show notes, and we will see you in our group, because if you miss it, you're going to be sad. Thanks so much.
It's never too late to start.
Never too late to start. You don't have to be in it today to be a part of it, but the sooner the better, because the longer you get to build that relationship with God. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share this podcast with everyone that you know, and we will see you next time. Bye, everybody.